have a sense of what it is that they can actually achieve or move towards a sense of recovery vision. Without that, there is very little motivation to actually take the steps that are needed. And so we discussed developing a rationale for making changes. I'm going to touch on that a little bit again today. The rationale that I'm speaking about is what is important to this person. The yin and yang of what is important to a person is that there's what is important to them and what's important for them. And the rationale is about identifying and discovering what is important to this person, which for parents, oftentimes what's important to them is they really desire to raise successful and healthy children. It's very important to them. This is a core value of parents and desire. And what is important for them, if they are having difficulties in accomplishing that value and that vision, is that it's important for them likely to attend parenting classes. It's important to our parents and caregivers that their needs are met, all sorts of needs, whatever those might be, physical, emotional, sense of belonging needs or esteem needs. And it's important that a person takes personal responsibility for those. I heard someone say once is that we should have two statues of liberty. On the East Coast, the Statue of Liberty represents freedom. And I can do what I want, and I can be who I am and who I want to be. And this person also suggested that on the West Coast, we have a Statue of Liberty that represents responsibility, or a statue of responsibility for us to take personal responsibility for ourselves and our lives. So these are things that describe this inspirational rationale for change, is what is identifying what is important to a person. And so that is our task, is to identify that. So last week, we covered that quality of hope and recovery vision, which is our first, in my mind, our first step in recovery, is supporting someone in identifying and the sense of inspiration of why should I do the things that I need to do to recover? Because sometimes people think, the juice is not worth the squeeze if they are so overwhelmed by their challenges. So our developing a sense of hope and recovery vision. And so this week, we're going to explore accessing strengths. This is the exploration phase of recovery, which is exploring someone's abilities, their talents, their skills. And so that's what we're going to focus on today. And then next Thursday, it'll be on taking steps. So what I would like for you to do is to use your annotate button, or whatever they call that thing, to put in the box here on the screen here, the strengths that you have observed in your clients. Is what strengths have you already seen? What are the things that you have seen in your clients that have been how they are strong? Like resilience, for example. I remember when I was working with people that lived homeless, back in the mid-90s, I started a job working with people that were homeless. And at first I thought, there is nothing here. There's no strengths here. And then as I got to know people that lived homeless and worked for many years, supporting people in housing, I began to see incredible strengths of being resourceful and resilient, to know how to be able to navigate the system, to know how to have supportive friends. And so many of you are identifying these, resilience, a sense of humor, people that are resourceful and creative. Whoever wrote resilient, would you mind just saying a little bit about what you mean by resilient? Who wrote resilience in there? What do you think And you'll need to unmute yourself if you would.
So I did that one. I think like sometimes it kind of goes hand in hand with resourceful too, but sometimes what we would consider like an emergency, a crisis, it's kind of like their everyday modality too. And to respect that and to acknowledge that and to go with their agenda sometimes too and see like what do they end up coming up with versus like us wanting to like help and jump in right away too.
Yeah, to jump in and fix it, but to be with them in their difficulty, but then supporting them and how to figure it out. Thank you, Denise. Yeah, thank you. Someone wrote a huge big red determination. Who wrote that? And could you unmute yourself and just describe what you mean by determination?
I wrote that. I wrote that because I have several clients that they do have a very strong-willed self-determination. Like they're determined, whether it's the right choices they're determined to make or positive changes, you know. I just find I have several clients when they are determined to do something, I mean, there's nothing holding them back. And so trying to channel that self-determination to use in, you know, in the right way.
Yes, that's really a good point that you make, is that each of the strengths can be used in a direction towards something that is really socially helpful and helpful for the family and helpful in growth, or it can be used for determination to, you know,
self-sabotage.
Self-sabotage, that's right. Yeah. Yes. Oh my goodness. And this is where the whole history of trauma and playing out certain patterns around what we call the reenactment triangle of either experiencing oneself as a victim or a persecutor or as a rescuer, and yeah, self-sabotaging. Yeah, a couple people someone put strong and they put strong-willed. And so I can see where that can be used in two different directions, to be you know, really, really strong to move forward, or really stubborn to stay stuck. Well, identifying these strengths is our first task. So thank you for those that wrote in the various strengths that we see. I think our ability to see the strengths is critically important in our work, is for us to be able to see them and to support and to channel those strengths. Let's see. Now, how do I get rid of, I have to sort of get rid of the, because the words, I don't know if they stayed on for you, but the words, Karina, did the words stay on for you on the?
Yeah, they're still showing up. End your share screen and do it again.
If you go to the top of the button and click on where you annotated, you can just hit the clear button.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Clear all drawings. Thank you so much for that. I'm learning something new every day. Oh, now I have to push save maybe, or get rid of that. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that advice. In the little circle here, we're going to be talking a little bit about these. Obviously, I'm not going to be going through all of these in a short presentation, but about a couple of decades ago, Martin Seligman and Mihail Csikszentmihalyi, I can't pronounce his name very well, did a lot of work in developing positive psychology. And this identifying the strengths that people have. They identified 24 strengths in all of the research. They sort of boiled it down to 24 strengths that are in the inner circle there, that are associated with 6 virtues that are around the outside. And these six virtues are those that have been identified by philosophers over many centuries, or spiritual teachers, or leaders, or mystics, or people that have begun to boil down what are some of the essential virtues that, for the most part, all of humankind would gravitate for it, or associate with, or acknowledge that these are very, very helpful around the sort of the courage and wisdom and knowledge, sense of humanity, justice. But that one sure rises up for a lot of us right now in our current climate situation with the police force and people that are oppressed and racism. A sense of temperance, self-control, self-regulation around our emotions. And then transcendence is a desire for spirituality and becoming the person that we were born to be, a sense of hope and possibility. And then these strengths that are on the inner circle are those things that support us in being able to live out these core values or these virtues. And the research has indicated that by accessing these strengths, that we actually buffer against mental illness and the tendency to need to use alcohol and other drugs, which we identified last week through the teaching of Gabor Mate, that this is so much about pain, and anesthetizing pain is why people use alcohol and other drugs. And so I want to play, just to talk a little bit about this science of strengths, and play this little video about the science of strengths and the science of character, and where this essentially sort of comes from.
There are 7 billion, well actually 7.1 billion humans on the planet. And each one of us has a unique character. So what determines your character? You do, and all the people around you. And of course some genetics too. But there's new science proving that if you focus on certain parts of who you are, you can develop your character and ultimately live a more meaningful, successful, and happy life, no matter what your circumstances. I mean, isn't that what we're all trying to figure out?
Oh, what?
This whole idea about developing our character really took shape in 2004, when two psychologists suggested that instead of just focusing on all the things that can go wrong with us, it's also important to celebrate all the things that can go right. You see, they looked throughout history to identify core virtues that humans across cultures have agreed lead to a meaningful life. And then they identified 24 character strengths that, when practiced and developed, could lead to these virtues. And they organized them, like scientists have done throughout history to understand things better. These groundbreaking studies showed that every person is a unique combination of these strengths. Like for me, I'm high on curiosity. I could work a little on the prudence. Actually, what is prudence? Anyhow, one of the most interesting parts of all this is they found that if we focus on building upon the strengths we have, it has a lasting effect on our happiness and well-being. So think about it. What are your top 5 strengths? Now, another part of this is that you can help shape other people's character too. They found that the key to human relationships is ultimately appreciating the character strengths in others. To explore this, we asked people around the world, who do you admire and why?
I admire my mother the most because she's very loving and caring.
Восхищаюсь целеустремленными людьми, которые готовы бороться за свою цель.
The person I admire the most is I'm Singapore.
My sister, because she is so tough and so brave.
People who use their creative energy to make the world a better place.
This powerful new framework paved the way for a whole new era of social science that, it turns out, is unpacking a very old idea.
So I just want to say a couple things about this. All of the undergraduate and graduate courses that I took over many, many years, I was an ongoing student for a long time. I don't recall any courses that, my last graduate degree is from 1995. I don't recall any classes in talking about what is strong with a person. It was always about what was wrong with a person. We talked about what was the matter with people, not what mattered to people. It was a completely different orientation back in my schooling in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I remember back to grade school, everything was all about circling what was wrong, where I got it wrong. In our mentality, in the way that we approach life, in the way that we watch television, in the way that we read the paper, in the way we do almost everything, as we see essentially what is wrong. Part of it is survival, because we need to be able to predict what could go wrong so that we can prevent it. So it's very important that we do that. But our focus in the areas of recovery really didn't begin. Recovery as a term for people with mental illness didn't even surface until the 90s. And so it was always about what was wrong. And now we have really shifted in our thinking to have a completely different framework around recovery, including on the lower left-hand side, finding a sense of meaning and purpose in life, accessing hope and optimism, finding meaningful connections to other people, and a sense of identity. I remember working with a fellow who lived with schizophrenia, and I was working down at what was called a Spectrum Community Mental Health on 18th in Chicago at the Lighthouse there. Some of you may be familiar with the Lighthouse as a drop-in center. And there's a program there called Artworks, Spectrum Artworks. And we supported people with schizophrenia in developing their art. And I recall when one of the individuals in that program had an art show over, I think it was over at Common Grounds coffee shop on Franklin, something like that. And he was showing his art. And when he gave his little talk about his art, he said that I no longer think of myself as a schizophrenic. I think of myself as an artist. His whole sense of identity shifted when he began to access his creative abilities. And creativity is one of his core strengths, is to be able to create something. And his whole identity changed. So when we talk about strengths, we also talk about empowerment and empowering people by accessing what is important to them and accessing their strengths to support them in moving in the direction of those strengths. Albert Einstein had an ability to see that everybody is a genius. It's just that everybody has different abilities and different strengths. And so our task in here is to inspire hope by identifying the unique strengths that someone has. And so empowerment really materializes through developing that recovery vision of what someone can be, what their potential is, and it's built upon a sense of hope and optimism, and having that sense of hope and optimism. So we evoke what matters to a person through open-ended questions such as, tell me what you care most about in life. Or how do you hope your life will be different in a year? How do you hope your life will be different in 5 years? I like the video on strengths. Who do you admire? And what about them do you admire? To begin to identify what they associate with, what they project onto others, is likely part of themselves in some undeveloped capacity. Or questions like, if I asked your closest friend what matters most to you, what would they say? So these are all ways that we elicit from a person what really matters to them. Now, there are significant challenges to developing this recovery vision. And with Maslow's motivational model or hierarchy of needs, he identified deficiency needs and growth needs. And when these deficiency needs aren't met, particularly the physiological needs and safety needs, then our primary focus is on meeting those needs from a survival perspective. Many of our clients and those that I lived with that were homeless were living in survival mode, which means it will do whatever it takes to get what I need. And one of the persons that shared earlier about the strength, there are these life crises that someone is dealing with, symptoms of mental illness or a focus on drug use or people that have given up hope. And so these barriers are very powerful. And so how can we use strengths to be able to begin to target the specific area that a person needs in terms of their being able to meet those basic human needs? I just have to play this because Mr. Rogers, I think, has a way of doing this that is amazing, how he is able to hone in on somebody's essential qualities. So I'm going to play this just because it always makes me feel good to watch it. And I hope it's somewhat encouraging for you too, because he's a master at seeing the goodness and the strengths in children, but in everybody, I think.
Hi, neighbor. I like you exactly as you are. You're the only person who is exactly like you. So in a way, you've already won in this world because you're the only one who can be you. The things you do are always a little bit different from anybody else. And that's the way it's supposed to be. When people let you know that they're glad you're the way you are, doesn't that give you a beautiful feeling inside yourself? I hope you're able to grow to respect whoever you are inside. There isn't a whole lot we can do about our outside kind of growing. Some of us grow tall and some of us grow short. Some of us have one color skin and some of us have another. That's all outside stuff. And thinking about neighbors and friends are all ways of growing inside. And part of the fun of that kind of growing is that it can go on all our lives. And our insides have a different way of growing. Our thoughts and our feelings grow. And there's a lot we can do about them. We can try to understand them and love them and help them to grow well and turn out to be glad we're the way we are and glad our friends are the way they are. You know, everyone has lots of ways of feeling. And all those ways of feeling are fine. It's what we do with our feelings that matter in this life. I trust that you're growing in ways that will help you with whatever feelings you may have when you're a child and when you're a grown-up. Did you ever have anybody hurt your feelings? Did anyone ever say something to you that made you feel really small and not very lovable? That feels awful, doesn't it? But isn't it nice when somebody helps you feel good about who you are? I mean, if you look for it, you'll probably find something fine inside of everybody. Every one of us wants to know that we're a lovable person. We've just got that inside of us. And when we can know it for sure, it's such a good feeling. As you grow, I trust that you are finding many more ways to show and tell people that you love them. Those are the most important things that you'll ever learn to do. Because loving people and animals and the world we all live in is the most important part of being alive. You always make each day such a special day. You know how? By just your being you. Only one person in this whole world like you. That's you yourself. I'll be back next time. Bye-bye.
So I realize that's a little bit long to be listening to Mr. Rogers talk about all these affirmations. But it's something that we easily forget, is the whole role of affirmations of someone. And I think perhaps it is one of the most powerful things that we can do to support a person in identifying what is strong with them or their strengths, is by being able to identify what is strong in them, what is good about them, or what is their qualities. And so there's several different ways that we can do this. There are certain things that just make us feel good. A statement of appreciation, simply like, thanks for coming in today. Helps a person to feel like, yeah, you're welcome for doing that. Or compliments, you look really nice today, is a way to, these are just sort of more shallower forms of affirmation. But there's other forms of affirmations that also really tend to inspire. And these are identifying someone's values and to be able to see those. And I think, through the lens of Mr. Rogers, has that gift of being able to see inside a person and the essential quality that makes them something special somehow, is to be able to see the core values that someone has and make statements about, you really care a lot about your kids. We can also identify achievements. It's amazing that you were able to get your GED through all of the challenges that you faced. It's just amazing that you were able to navigate the bus system and get to that appointment with 2 transfers, and just to be able to get there. It's amazing that you were able to get that into the treatment as you said that you would do. Whatever achievements, whether you accomplished getting through treatment or getting that certificate, to be able to point those out is very, very helpful. This is where strengths come in. The S of VACE, the acronym, that sense of determination that you were able to stick to that. The sense of humor that somebody mentioned in our whiteboard, that you have just this great sense of humor that really is inspirational. Or that sense of resilience that somebody observed. You are so resilient that you were able to get through that difficult time and still stay focused on what your goals are. And so this is where we have to point out the strengths. And then finally is just effort. You worked really hard on cleaning your apartment. You put a lot of effort into that parenting program that you were going to, and reading the manual and getting through that and practicing those things. Any kind of effort can also be very inspirational. So once again, here are the strengths and 6 virtues that are listed. I have up there the website for where you can access these. It's the VIA character. VIA stands for Values in Action.org. And you can go on this site for yourself. I think it's very helpful for us to identify our strengths so that we naturally are more able to support people in identifying their strengths. And you can take this questionnaire. It's quite a few questions that helps to determine what your 5 strengths are. And it helps to boil down, what are my strengths? Now, of course, all of us have all of these strengths. They're just part of who we are. It's just that some of them show up more than others in our own unique way of being in the world. So yeah, my strengths are spirituality and humility, forgiveness, love, and curiosity. And I use these strengths to be able to continue in the vision and mission that I have for my own life and what my own core values are. So these character strengths can be used at various places depending upon what needs we are focused on. For people that are on this hierarchy of needs that are down around physiological needs, that their physical needs aren't met. They don't have enough food. They need to go to the food shelf to get their food. They don't have enough money. Perhaps they're homeless. Is that quality of perseverance. If we can support somebody in identifying that that is one of their core strengths, that heart strength of perseverance, and begin to draw out how they can express that strength, we can begin to support them in continuing to meet their needs in the physiological realm. If their safety needs aren't met, they don't have housing, or that they're in an unsafe neighborhood, or they are violent themselves or in a violent relationship, the sense of bravery, another heart strength, can be accessed to be able to do the things that they need to do to get out of that situation or to manage those violent urges. If the love and belonging needs, that's the area of focus for a person, that they don't have a sense of recovery community or relationships with family or friends, they don't have a recovery network. The social intelligence, identifying that strengths of how they get along with others, how they practice kindness with others, or how they reach out to others, how they are a good friend to others, or a support to others, which how they can also then receive support from others. Esteem needs, that's that need to be practicing our skills and exercising our talents in the world. The strength of teamwork, that community strength, can be accessed. And for those that are sort of focused on becoming the person that they want to become, that they were born to become, the transcendence or self-actualization, or finding a sense of mindfulness or peacefulness in the world, can be accessed. So I want to do a poll question now. And don't put it up yet, Karina. I just want to review this. We covered this last time, is that everyone's at a different stage of recovery from whatever they're recovering from. A form of addiction, could be any form of addiction, gambling, sex addiction, shopping addiction, the need for progress, alcohol or other drugs. Or it can be recovery from mental illness and anxiety, or a bipolar disorder, or perhaps some kind of depressive illness. And so everyone's at different stages. And the overwhelmed by the illness is that first stage where somebody is just like overwhelming, or they're overwhelmed by their circumstances and just can't see anything at all going forward. The given into the illness is that they've kind of just settled into the fact that I have this illness, I have this addiction, and there's not a lot I can do about it. They're maybe not overwhelmed by it as in that first stage, but they've kind of just given up, and they no longer really focus in on their own recovery and doing what they need to do, what's important for them to be in their recovery. The third stage is a person sees that change is possible, that they actually can make a change, that there is some hope and optimism. And they're at that questioning stage of what can I do? Kind of a preparation stage of change about how am I going to get out of this? And then the commitment to change is the next, where a person has realized that they can make a change, and they are making that commitment. They're preparing to make a change, and they are committed to it. They maybe don't have the plan, but that's what they're working on, is developing that plan based on that commitment. And then finally, somebody who's in the action stage is they're moving beyond the illness. They're doing what they need to do, what's important for them to access what's important. So go ahead and put that poll up there. I'm curious what stage of recovery are the majority of your clients in? Can you put that up, Karina? So we're going to just identify which stage of recovery are the majority of your clients in. Overwhelmed, given in, change is possible, committed to change, and taking action or taking steps. So a lot of responses coming in, and especially in the area that the change is possible. So we've got about 96, about half of you have responded so far, of the 194 on this call, that the proportions are A lot of people there's a lot of people overwhelmed. A lot of your clients are overwhelmed. A lot have given in, and a sizable amount are in that stage of change is possible. Okay, you can go ahead and publish those results. So, as you can see, that 21% of the people that you see are overwhelmed by the illness. 26% of your caseload have given into the illness or circumstances and have kind of just settled into life as it is and don't have a sense of hope and possibility, but are kind of just treading water, getting by. And then almost half people are change is possible. They're in that questioning. Very small percent are committed to change, and nobody is that they're taking action. That's probably about the time that you have discharged them, and hopefully that's where they're moving towards. Can somebody just speak to that first one, the overwhelmed by the illness or circumstances? One of you who put that in there, what do you see as the main challenges in there for working with somebody who's overwhelmed by the illness? What are the challenges that you face? Who put overwhelmed by the illness?
I would say denial is a huge one. A lot of parents that I have, they're so overwhelmed and things are just kind of falling apart, and there's not a lot of admitting that drug use, that it's an issue or a problem or that they need to make changes. So I would say denial.
Yeah. A lot of the language that we use around this now is that they're in pre-contemplation, which is how we also describe denial. The pre-contemplation stage of change is where somebody is just not seeing any possibility, and that right now they don't have a plan to make changes for the foreseeable future. And the defense mechanism of denial, we've used that they are in denial, sometimes can become a little bit judgmental. It's just that they don't see at that moment that there's any use in them making any changes. But yeah, it's the kind of that sense of denying that. Sometimes it's just denying that there is a problem, but they just aren't aware of that. How about someone that wrote given into the illness or circumstances? What do you see that one? How do you see that getting played out in your clients? Who put given into the illness or circumstances? 31 people that said that. Someone have someone they're thinking of that is kind of given into it. They're just treading water. They're just getting by. How does that present itself? Anyone willing to share on that one?
I picked the overwhelm mainly because I'm an investigator, but I have seen some clients that have given in where they just kind of, they're overwhelmed by everything, and at some point they just kind of give up on, that things are going to get better, and then they just kind of, status quo where they are trying to skate by doing the minimum.
Yeah, just getting by, doing the minimum that they need to do. And last week we talked about the carrot and the stick. And so part of it, are they just doing so that they can get by based on the requirements of them? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Yeah. Yeah, so there's just, go ahead.
I put that there too. I don't have clients that I work with individually, but I oversee grants, probably about 140 grants across the nation. And what we're seeing with a lot of our grantees is a huge relapse, especially now during COVID. And what they're saying, what some of the professionals are saying is a large contributor to the relapse is the isolation and the boredom. And then I think too, the overdoses, because people are using alone, they're not using together.
Yeah. Others of you, are you seeing that as well, that people are part of this problem is being kind of given into the illness is there's the lack of support systems in place for them? Thanks for that, Shirley. Many of you put change as possible questioning. Like half of your caseload are in that place of like, oh, you know what, I think that I can do something, but I'm just still kind of stuck in that overwhelm, but change is possible. Anybody have a description without naming any names of someone that you're working with that is in that kind of place? And what does that look like? Who's willing to share something from that position of change is possible questioning? Anybody? Anybody writing something in the chat about that?
Well, I'm a guardian ad litem, and so I am part of the team with social workers. And the piece that I see in this is that when parents are with the social worker very often and dealing with the case plan, they're able to say, and I think believe that this is where they want to do, this is what they want to do, and they can describe it. But when they walk out the door or are on their own for very long, that they then fall back into the old patterns. And so it's a back and forth struggle and challenge that I watch social workers go through, that I really appreciate, that it is a major challenge, but it's catching the hope, but not being able to keep a hold of it if they don't have the strong support system or the person who's who helps them keep the vision right with them.
Yes, yes. Yeah, there is that part of them that can see possibility, but the resources they don't feel are there, the strengths aren't there, the ability to do it isn't really strong in them. Brianna wrote, it looks like, well, I'm here, but I don't know what to do. You know, looking for answers and ideas and support. So a lot of helpful chat comments in here. Thank you for those. A very small percent have been able to figure out while you're working with them and access those kinds of resources to get through the treatment program or to get through the parenting program or to make the changes that really take hold and make that commitment to change. So you're working with very, very early on stages of change individuals who are just, trying to get by. And as was mentioned by Shirley, some people are kind of sinking back in with the current COVID situation without the supports in place. All right, I'm going to go back to my screen here. And so the role of the recovery coach in these various stages of recovery are identified this way. For those that are overwhelmed by the illness, much of what we want to do is to decrease the emotional distress. For mental illness, this is decreasing the symptoms of mental illness. It might be through medications, it might be through some kind of treatment. They really need to be able to get beyond the powerful impact of the mental illness or the addiction. It's dealing with the cravings. They're because of that feeling overwhelmed by the illness. And it's so important that someone in that is overwhelmed by it has some relief from the power of the addiction and the power of the overwhelming symptoms. For somebody that's given into the illness, they're at that stage, it's our task as the recovery coach is to instill a sense of hope and a sense of possibility and try to rebuild a positive self-image. Some of this has to do with taking the smallest of incremental steps, which we're going to cover next week when we talk about taking steps, because essentially when we can take a small step, it builds self-efficacy, the sense of that I can do it. And as Sir Isaac Newton noted in the law of motion, is that when something starts in motion, it tends to stay in motion. If we can just get the smallest of step when somebody has given into the illness, that can begin to build a sense of hope. And also identifying strengths, which we'll talk about in a second. When somebody is at that stage where about half of the clients you work with, that change is possible or they're questioning, is to empower that person to participate in his or her recovery by taking those small steps. If they can actually activate those steps and to begin to take small steps in supporting them in that developing that sense of self-efficacy. Given into the illness, maybe they can't take small steps at that moment. It's building hope for that possibility and then taking the small steps. The commitment to change, which is a small percentage of those you work with, it's helping identify strengths and needs in terms of skills, resources, supports to really build that support system around them and accessing supports. And then for people that are in the action stage or moving beyond, we help use the strengths and get the necessary skills, resources, and supports to support them in getting moving. The possible strengths that could be utilized at each of these stages of recovery when someone's overwhelmed by the illness is perhaps the area of spirituality. If someone has some kind of sense of belief or faith that the universe is a good place, or that nature is a good place, or that there is love in the world, or something that they can actually identify that and the sense of humility of being in that place of being overwhelmed by the illness. Perhaps there could be some strengths that can specifically help somebody who's overwhelmed by the illness. Somebody who's given into the illness, that's the strength of hope and self-regulation to be able to access one's ability to be able to manage their life because they have a hope for something better. In the stage of change is possible, curiosity and open-mindedness or wisdom is the virtue. To be able to be curious about what would happen if you did get through this? What would life look like if you got to the other side? And developing that ability to be curious and open-minded. The quality of, or the stage of recovery of commitment to change, perhaps the persistence and bravery could be possible strengths for this person to access, because it takes so much courage to actually hold on to that commitment and keep moving forward. And then the actions for change in the moving beyond of love of learning and creativity and creating the life that somebody really wants for themselves. So I want you to use your chat box to identify Tanya's strengths here. And what stage of recovery she might be at and what her needs are, but especially identify her strengths. So here, this is a situation that Tanya became homeless after ending a 15-year abusive marriage. She moved to Minneapolis from Chicago with her 2 teenage sons to be closer to her sister, but with a small house, there wasn't enough room for them all. Tanya eventually located a family shelter and has been there for the past 2 months. She recently started a good paying job at a warehouse, but then her car broke down, and without transportation, she had to call into work twice this week. She worries she may lose the job. She loves her sons and feels guilty when they say they hate living in the shelter, they miss their friends in Chicago, and beg her to move back. Tanya is mostly abstinent, but under stress uses marijuana to cope. In the chat box, just identify what are some of the strengths that you see in Tanya. What strengths do you see? As you look through this, and I'm going to shift over so I can see the responses in the chat box. So I'm going to stop sharing. So what strengths do you see that she has? Hardworking. She's determined, incredibly strong. The ability to find a new job. Good help seeker, sense of hope. She's flexible, resourceful, tenacious. She is resilient. She gets support. There's a lot of courage there. That connection to her sister is such a great relationship. Brave, yeah. All of these amazing strengths that she has that I have to tell you, when I've worked with people in the past, I go right to problem solving. I go to like, what can you do? How can you get out of this? How can you do that? And I bypass that affirmation of the strengths, of the values, of the effort, and of the achievements that she's made by getting the job. So the values of she really wants what's best for her kids. The achievement of being able to get out of that abusive relationship and move to the Twin Cities. The strengths of being resourceful, the strength of being able to determination and resilient, and the effort that she put forth is if I keep that acronym in my mind, that VACE, and draw up those affirmations, is to build on the character strengths that she has. And I really wish that I had a greater ability to be able to keep on identifying what those strengths are in a person before I go to problem solving or trying to fix the problem. So I want to identify 5 different ways of identifying and living into strengths. These are ones that I've been observing, that I've been reading a little bit about, that I've been using. I tend not to do an educational program without me actually using it and trying it and practicing it to see how does this actually work for myself. Really, all of our recovery-oriented practices are things that we naturally can do because it's forward-focused. It's not therapy, as I said last week. We're not trying to resolve issues from the past. We're supporting people in accessing their abilities and their strengths, evoking that optimism and hope, and then building on that. So I'm going to go through these one by one and explain these are possibilities of how you can identify and live into strengths, including using that VACE acronym for providing affirmations and doing that first before we move to problem solving. So this is something that I've been using is first of all to become aware of my strength. Only a third of people, according to research, a third of the people are aware of what their strengths are and could name them and identify them. So I encourage you to go to that VIA strengths, viacharacter.org and take that for yourself just to become aware of some of your unique individual strengths. And then to observe those throughout the day. One of my strengths, personal here, one of my strengths is curiosity. And I live up in Pine City. I happen to be on Cross Lake. And about 2 weeks ago, across the lake from me, I heard some guy yelling, just profanity. More just kind of not like he was mad, but he was just barking out this profanity. And at first I was curious because one of my strengths is curiosity. But then I was just irritated and judgmental because, you know, who is this guy? He's over there like swearing. So I was judging him, you know, like irritated and judging, and my curiosity ended. And so I was sitting out there this morning, and there he was again, barking out the same swear words. I'm not going to say them, but it was just two very powerful swear words. And I became really curious about what's going on. And I honestly think that this is probably a fellow that has like Tourette's, because it was the same kind of way he was saying it. It sounded more like it was a disorder and that he was in a lot of distress. And this is the way that he just expresses himself. So I was observing, using my strength of curiosity to become curious about, and part of my core values are to be of service and kindness. If I ever were to run into this person, instead of being irritated by them, to be more curious and to be moved towards that person, perhaps out of compassion to alleviate suffering in some way. And so I began to express this strength with intention. So as I live my life of curiosity, it would mean moving towards people that I feel I might judge for some reason by what they say or who they are, or their attitudes, their opinions, but to move towards them. Within my family, I have a lot of difference of opinion around political opinion. And instead of like not even talking about it, I want to be able to use my curiosity to move in their direction of curious about their idea and their opinion or their position on various topics, rather than not talking about it and experiencing this inner sense of judgment. So I use my strength to remain connected to my core values, which happen to be service and compassion and spirituality and being of help to others. And so I also can use this strength in times of crisis to reconnect to my core values. When somebody violates my boundaries, I can use my core strengths as a safety plan to be able to stay connected to my core values so that I can live out my mission. So this is just one way to be able to realize and express and use strengths. I'm going to stop there and see if there's any comments at all, thoughts on this or enhancement of this idea before I move on to the next one. Just to give you a chance. And how you might use this with clients. Okay, I'll move on to the second one. And this is what manifesting a strength into life. I'm going to play this and let Todd Cashton talk about just a quick 2-minute video about how to manifest the strength into life, which happens to also be curiosity. Apparently, a lot of people, a core strength is curiosity, but I'll just let him explain it.
I hear an interesting talk, I'm watching a movie, and right before the trailers, no, I've got to see that movie, I'm intrigued. This bottom-up effect. Really interesting, bizarre, novel thing happens, I'm curious, and that's the end of the story. And when it comes to character strengths and people who've taken the VIA, the millions of people that have taken the VIA, curiosity always usually ends up in people's top 5. So they say well, this is something I don't need to work with. And what I usually argue is a couple things. One of the things is that we know what it's like to be curious, but that's not what brings you happiness and meaning in life. It's acting on your curiosity. Because what happens is for people that have anxiety problems, they're regularly curious about other people. They're regularly curious about what the future offers, but they're also anxious and they act on their anxiety and avoid and don't act on their curiosity and explore. But the other piece is, I'm talking about passive curiosity. Interesting thing falls into my field of vision and I want to explore it. But what we forget is we can be active and teach people and teach ourselves to wield this little laser. That this is the currency of living a good life, of what we focus our attention on becomes what our identity is. It becomes the building blocks of what our life is about. And we need to wield this laser so that I can look for novelty. And what's unique talking to you this time of the other hundreds of times that we've talked before, and in my romantic relationships, 7 years, 10 years, 30 years in, that boredom is the big factor that sort of prevents people from recognizing that my partner is no longer satisfying me. It's boredom. It's not conflict, it's boredom. One of the things is we fall on our templates. As soon as we think we understand our partner, then we stop paying attention and we fall back on our stereotypes. So by wielding curiosity top down, I'm looking for what's novel and unique about them. That's the thing about the strength that I think is being underutilized, where the action is to really train people and make this more of a fundamental part of their lives.
So just a couple of comments. I like what he said. We act on our anxiety rather than acting on the curiosity. And so we could stay stuck in our anxiousness. But if we can evoke that curiosity about the world and move in the direction of what we're curious about. With depression, instead of acting on depression, which is just staying stuck in depression, finding that I have a core value of adventure, which includes activity. If I can act on my adventure and activity and act upon that, which is being physical activity is almost like an SSRI in terms of an antidepressant medication. It helps us to get out of our depression. So if we can access that strength and move in the direction of an activity, it will help with the depression. Instead of acting on cravings for alcohol or other drugs, I can act on my desire for social relationships. Say one of my core strengths is love or kindness or social ability. I can act on that. If I activate that and move in that direction, then I'm less likely to act upon my craving. And these are things that recovery coaches can support with. Okay, any comments or questions or about this particular way of manifesting strength into life? Anyone have somebody that might be an example where this might be helpful to, before I move on to the next one? Anybody? So this is being able to act on that strength rather than staying stuck in the mental health or in the addiction.
I just was gonna say that I feel that this is so true. I feel that oftentimes when I become depressed, everything just suddenly, I'm not curious about anything. It's just, you're just stuck.
Yeah.
But I'm doing really well personally when I'm constantly trying to learn new things or I'm doing my hobbies. And then I think I can see that in I really can see that in the clients as well. If they're having a good day, if they're staying, if they're able to stay engaged and hopeful. And then I see other times when it's just a really, really tough day where probably reminding them of their strengths would be really helpful.
Yes. Thank you, Katie, for that. I think you're right. I think mostly this needs to become a habit of identifying strengths. We call it positive self-talk, the ability to be able to, it's not Pollyanna's positive self-talk like, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me, or just trying to, but it's really accessing true strengths and putting them Post-its up around that can remind us of these strengths that we actually have, that are embedded inside of us. They are part of who we are. And so to be able to move out of being overwhelmed by the illness or stuck in the illness, this has to become part of practice. And we call it maybe a self-care plan. How do I take care of myself? How do I know what I need to do to be able to stay connected to my core values? So thank you for that, Katie. Another one is to be able to identify strengths in history. I like to draw a timeline for lots of different things. But for this particular situation is to draw a timeline in someone's life as to when things were good. And life was good when it's above the line, and life was very difficult when it was below the line. And to be able to literally draw this map out of a timeline, could be, I mean, it could be the last 10 years, it could be somebody's whole life, it could be the last 5 years, however, period of time you want to put in there. And you draw the line with the line going above the line when life was good. As Katie mentioned, some days are really good. Some periods of life were really good. And some periods of life were really difficult. And as you map this out, you can then begin to draw out, well, what was going on during this particular time when life was really, really difficult? What was going on? And how did you get from this low point up to this higher point? What was it that you did? What strengths did you use, or how did you get out of that? And when a person can begin to identify their strengths, how they got through those low times into that high times, then we can evoke from them their experience around that and use open-ended questions to explore that, and a lot of affirmations and identifications of what those strengths are. Anyone want to be able to share how they might be able to see using something like this in your work? How might you use this life, the history, drawing this out?
I could share something. I am not working with people necessarily who are in recovery, but people who are seeking to become relative caregivers or foster parents. And one of the challenges with that is an intrusive process of sharing personal information and looking at times that people are not proud of, where things have been struggles, and how to not be off-putting to people, to be able to really keep them engaged in a process of understanding that. And I really am thinking about use of some of these tools as interview tools to draw out some of the strengths that were used, some of the tools that help them through difficult times, really to be able to see the transferable connection to caregiving in challenging situations, but also to help people feel more connected as they're talking about struggles and worried that they won't be approved to be the caregiver for the grandchild, for example. So I like these tools as a complement to those assessments.
Sure. Yeah, because knowing that, well, everyone goes through difficult times, but also it's the strengths that really become the characteristics that they are going to be able to use to support others as well in their caregiving role. Well, that's a great example. Thanks, Melanie. Lisa said, I think this can be good to identify exceptions or discrepancies to pain and powerlessness. Right, when somebody is feeling that sense of pain and powerlessness, is to be able to talk about what is on the other side, what supports you during those times, and historically what has helped you during those times as well. All right, well, thank you for those examples. The next one is literally a strength mantra. So if somebody's strength is like spirituality, and that's defined in so many ways. Mary Oliver defines it this way. When she was asked, what is spirituality? She said, it's when we go about our day, and to each person we meet and to each thing we encounter, we say, thank you, thank you. So to have this as a mantra for when I'm going about my day and I find myself, instead of saying thank you, maybe I'm saying inside myself, I'm saying something much more derogatory because that judgment, and all of us experience judgment. We project judgment all the time, out. Particularly, it's coming from a place of judging ourselves and not being kind to ourselves generally. That we project that out. But when we encounter situations, if my spirituality is rooted in a sense of gratitude for what comes my way, that can be a strong, powerful strength when difficult times come. is instead of judgment, I use gratitude and sink down into that strength, knowing that's one of my strengths. For forgiveness and love, I have a friend that has a grandson. His name's Rexy. And he came home from school one day and said that a boy was picking on him. And his mother asked him, well, what did you do? He said, well, I just said to him, we don't need to like each other. We just need to get along. Powerful wisdom from a little boy who has as one of his strengths forgiveness and love, in his ability to say that. And so it can be any kind of a strength mantra that we can use that connects us to our strengths. Some of those could be over on the left-hand side for bravery, integrity, persistence, and energy, is to be able to say, even the darkest night will end and the sun will rise. There's a tattoo on someone that I think it's Maya Angelou, the still I rise. Some people put tattoos on that become connections to their core strengths and their core values, that they can stay connected. You have somebody that's tatted up, is maybe there's a tattoo that they have that they can remind themselves of that core strength they have of why they put that tattoo on in the first place. I love it. Steve Martin, of course, humorously says, thankfully, persistence is a great substitute for talent. When I make mistakes in life, instead of beating myself up, I can just, say, well, at least I'm persistent in continuing to move forward in where I want to go. And so the strengths of courage, emotional strengths that involve the exercise of will to accomplish goals in the face of opposition, external and internal, having that sense of will, which is a strength of courage and determination to keep going. Let me just check in with you for a second. Does anybody have a mantra that they use or support a client in a mantra who has a tattoo or some kind of way of being able to remind themselves of their core strength? Anyone have an example of that? So here's Shirley says, Zawani Mishi Nan, have pity on me to be humble. Shirley, you want to just say something just briefly about that? How you use that?
Yes. Caught me in the middle of munching too. In Ojibwe, that means, Zawani Mishi Nan means have pity on me. Have pity on me. It could also mean come and love me.
Ah, yeah.
Asking the Creator to come and love me and have pity on me because I'm a pitiful human being. Not being pitiful, like, in a bad way, but in a really humble way to always try to have humility in my day and with people I encounter.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you, Shirley. I do hard things. Breathe, survive, thrive. These are all mantras that we can use that reconnect us to our strengths. And when we can see that, maybe a person, you're in someone's home and they have a picture on the wall of someone, or maybe they have a statement on the wall, something that they have crocheted, or some saying on the wall that can become a mantra to reconnect them to their core strengths. Can be a strength mantra. And then reframing perceived failure into strength. Generally speaking, all of the failures that I've ever had in my life have led to some kind of strength or some kind of wisdom or something that helps to inform that I've hopefully learned from, or maybe I'm still learning, that can become a strength. I want to play just a video that describes this really, really well, and a great exercise. This is a YouTube video, so if you want to see it again, you can just go on YouTube, called The Power of a Reframe, because it's a very powerful tool.
If you adopt the mindset that I'm going to tell you in this video, your life can actually change. So please pay close attention to this video. Don't be fooled by the simplicity of this idea and watch this video till the very end. Hey guys, welcome back to Inside Junkie, and today I'm going to tell you about the power of a reframe. All the successful people I've ever seen have used this mindset without even knowing about it. Now, it took me years of studying these people to finally understand that this is what they were doing, and now I'm passing off that information to you. Now, most of us have had bad stuff happen to us. For some of us, it has been worse than others. There is no way to escape that. That is part of life. But what all successful people know how to do is to reframe the experiences they have had in a way that moves them closer towards their goals. This is much different than positive thinking. You can call this purposeful thinking. Now, before I tell you about this, I need you to understand that there are two kinds of realities in this world. One is objective reality, which consists only of facts, and one is subjective reality, which is how you see the world. Now, when you indulge in purposeful thinking, it doesn't matter what objective reality is. It doesn't matter if what happened was good or bad. All that matters is that you're able to view the situation from an angle that gives you the greatest peace of mind and helps you move forward in your life. Always remember this. Do and believe only that which moves you further towards your goals. I'll give you an example. Let's say you were born in a poor household, so you had to struggle growing up. You failed your university exams because you were sick. You got fired from your first job for being late. Now, most people after having these experiences would say something along the following lines. I'm unlucky. I was born in a poor household and this is why I got a bad education. I am unhealthy and so I get sick very easily. I got fired because my boss hates me and the whole world is unfair. Now, I'm not going to tell you to think positively if this is what has happened to you, because you know what? Even if you had said those things after having those experiences, you would be right. You actually might be unlucky and maybe your boss does hate you. But now tell me, does that really do anything for you? Does that move you ahead in your life in any way? Absolutely not. So let's try to reframe that situation. You were born in a poor household, so now you know how to struggle. You are tough and you can survive anywhere. Getting sick was a lesson for you to take care of your health, and getting fired taught you that you should always be on time no matter what the occasion. You see, the events were exactly the same. Nothing actually changed, but just because of the reframe, now you have learned so much from your own life that you hadn't even thought of before. This is why I don't always make videos on books. I try to make videos like this one so I can give you the tools that you need in life so that you can learn very important lessons from your own life. So now I'll give you a very important exercise that if you do this correctly, not only will you feel a lot better after doing it, your entire perspective of your life will change. This is something I made for myself and I call it the reframe exercise. Write down all the events that you think were bad in your life. Every single thing that is bothering you right now. If you had a divorce or breakup, if you lost your job, if you got bad grades at school, whatever problems you have faced in your life that you think have been holding you back, write them down. And now, the most powerful thing you can do for yourself is to reframe those situations in a way that makes them valuable lessons for your life. Here's how you can do this. I got fired from my job because, and now you insert your reframe. It taught me how to be punctual. I lost my life savings because it taught me how to invest wisely. I'll tell you something else. This technique is only as powerful as you can make it. If you tell me that, oh man, you don't even know how hard my life has been, then you might not be able to use this technique. Because the point is, no matter how hard your life has been, it is your responsibility and yours alone to learn something from it. Even if you've felt something so painful that you cannot describe it in words, you can still tell yourself that because you've had that pain, you can now help others who are going through that pain. You can stop others from experiencing that pain. See, that is the power of a reframe. I truly believe that if everyone learns to do this with their life, we can really change the world. Now, I don't know if this one video will change the world, but all I hope is that I can change your life just a little bit with these videos. Life is hard, but it can certainly be made easier if we know these tools. If you are
All right. Yeah, if you want to see that video again, I find that very, very useful to have done that exercise. So just to kind of wrap up, a couple of ways to consider reframes is when someone thinks I'm a failure, someone says that, you can say, you know, you continue to love your kids even in the midst of making mistakes. Life is way too hard. You're so courageous to keep making the changes you want to make. I just feel like giving up. Your faith and hope seem to keep you going when things get really tough. Now, these need to be genuine statements, not just sort of like, you know, rainbows and butterflies kind of a statement, genuine statements of observation of that strength and having identified that strength before, and to continuing to evoke that strength. So next week, so you can see sort of this has been the progression. Last week it was on hope and recovery vision and developing that rationale for change based on what's important to a person so they can pursue what's important for them. The accessing of strengths and continuing to remind someone of their strengths and to reframe failures, to be able to use strength mantras or to manifest strengths into the curiosity of one's life. And then next week, we are going to talk about taking steps towards that recovery vision. And so I think, Karina, what do we have to wrap up?
I'll let everyone know I will email out CEUs for today's session to everybody. And Steve, some folks were wondering, I'm sorry if you just said that, I was clicking around at the same time. If you're willing to share the PowerPoint again, I can send a copy of that. Apologies, it's a big file, and so when I send it, it automatically creates a Google Drive link since we use Google Suite. But let us know if you have issues accessing it. I can keep sharing it with folks and trying to work through it, but I will email those out.
Okay, all right. Any last comments or questions as we're wrapping up from any of you on this? Well, I hope that you have found this helpful to looking at strengths and that you're able to support your clients, and especially those that are overwhelmed by their life circumstances and challenges, or they've kind of gotten stuck in a way of living that does not really support them in moving in the direction of their own life recovery vision and what they might have in life, and that accessing these strengths will be helpful. So thank you all very much for joining us, and perhaps see you next week when we talk about taking steps.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.